things in the nutritional space, in the diet media, things that are purported to be the new and special thing, whether it's stopping eating at 5 p.m. and you'll live forever, or skip breakfast and you'll live forever. If anything sounds a little too special and a little too precious, it's probably not true. So there is a wide version of it doesn't effing matter within the realm of diet. Wide margin of it doesn't effing matter. What does matter is you choose the foods that you personally have a preference for, and you make sure that the majority of the diet is whole and minimally refined, whether you go a little more proteiny and fatty, or whether you go more veggie-y. The unifying principle of a healthier diet is one that has more whole and minimally refined foods and a minority of the junk, as it were, regardless of food sources.
What's up, my friend? I'm health expert Ted Rice, and I'm back with another episode of the Legendary Life Podcast. I've got a great guest for you today. His name is Alan Aragon. He's one of the top sports nutrition experts on the planet, and he is here today to clear up some confusion about what really matters. So if you've been wondering about intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating, or, what your metabolism is and how fat loss actually occurs, we're going to get into that today. Alan, as I said, is one of the world's leading experts in nutrition, a highly sought after speaker, and he's here today to help you. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, this show is all about clearing up health and fitness confusion by breaking down science-based information on how to lose fat, prevent disease, and live a longer, healthier life. One thing I want to say really quick before we get into the episode with Alan is that the Legendary Life Program 2020 has just opened. So that's my coaching program. I have both one-on-one coaching and group coaching available. I already have 7 spots in the group coaching already taken. So there's only a few spots left. If you're interested in that, go to legendarylifeprogram.com/apply. If you've been a listener, if you know about my approach, if you're new to the Legendary Life podcast, if you're new to me, the best place to start then is to go and watch my free masterclass, legendarylifepodcast.com/free. All right, enough said. Let's jump into the interview with Alan Aragon. Alan Aragon, thanks so much for coming back on the show. It's really excited to speak with you because it's been, I think, 2 years since your first appearance, and that first episode was so well received. So really excited to have you back on, man. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me on, man. 2 years feels like 2 lifetimes ago. So really happy to be on, dude.
I hear you. And I had to move to Thailand, and so much has happened. In fact, I want to start off like this. I was recently in the Big C, or actually the Tesco Lotus, which is the shopping market here near where I'm staying in Bangkok, Thailand. I was in line and I was getting some Greek yogurt and I had some cans of tuna. And there was a guy in front of me. I thought he was actually Thai because he was speaking Thai to the checkout clerk. But then I looked at him and he was European. And I was like, oh, okay. But then he looked at my cans of tuna. He's like, hey, you must really like your mercury. You're just mercury. That's full mercury. And he started this argument with me, and I didn't really get into it. He kept going, and I was like, okay, man, cool. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yep, love mercury. And he's like, just really obsessed about this mercury thing. Now, it turns out, I find out a little bit later, this guy lives here in this area and lives here, has a Thai wife, and they have a child, and he's in Bangkok, Thailand, and he's breathing in the smog here every day. And if you look at the stats, expats in general, usually, at least in Thailand, die a few years earlier compared to if they would have stayed in their home country. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they have a good time, but they die earlier. And specifically with a place like Bangkok, we know that the pollution levels are so bad that it's going to shave years off your life. And here he is worrying about the mercury content of the fish, right? And so one of the things that you and I talked about, I asked you about chrononutrition, in other words, early time restricted feeding. And what did you tell me, Alan, when I asked you about it?
It's a way to add that final 1% of neurosis to the way that you view nutrition and healthy eating.
And I think that one of the things that isn't talked about, and perhaps we can talk about what really matters, and then when it gets out of hand, is people are so focused on like, okay, well, the mercury and the fish, and then there's the pesticides on the fruit. So I got to buy them organic and all these details, but don't realize there's a cost to being so restrictive, so obsessive. There's a stress, there's a cost to that. There's a stress for that. Like you mentioned, a neurosis. That's going to add a level of stress to your life. And we're currently in a time where people are stressed and they're lonely and disconnected and having problems with their sleep. And man, how could we on this podcast today, with your expertise, help people get clear on what really matters and when they start to go too far and off the deep end, where they should, instead of worrying about mercury levels in tuna, focusing on the things that really matter and making sure that they keep their stress levels in check?
We can certainly try. These are big questions, and they're the tough to study questions because it's not like you can necessarily put together clinical trials that investigate these questions to their ultimate end. It's just not feasible, and it's not always ethical. So there would end up being a lot of speculation and stuff, but hey, I'm up for it.
Cool. Help us get clear on what really matters. What can we achieve with nutrition that really matters? And what point does it become this obsessive thing where it's just adding complication and probably some issues interacting with others if you're bringing your Tupperware to dinner, like one of my clients used to do when we got her away from that, and still losing fat, getting good results. Tell us what matters. What really matters for health, for longevity, and when does it cross the line?
That is such a tremendously huge question that everybody is trying to figure out. So if I were to toss my nickel's worth into this big old hat, it would be centered around how nutrition is affecting physical performance and body composition. So physical performance primarily being one's ability to execute activities of daily living, as well as recreational activities, and even up slightly into the sporting activities if you value fitness. So how does nutrition impact that? And then the other part of the formula would be, how does nutrition impact things like recovery and sleep and psychological state? How does it impact the psychosocial side of your health? If nutrition can positively impact those elements, then that is a good diet. The thing that is very difficult for people to accept is that there is a wide range of dietary possibilities in terms of food choices, as well as in terms of proportion of macronutrients that result in similar potentiating capacity for longevity and health. So it's very tough for people to hear that. It's very tough for people to hear that
there's no one true way, right?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough for people to hear that you can be, let's just say, a flat out extreme green-haired militant vegan, and you can take that person and compare them to the low-carb extremist. Both of them, as human organisms, have just about the same potential for health span and lifespan if they make the right choices and have the right lifestyle factors in place. And that's just very hard for people to process. It has to be one thing or another. It has to be a specific way or another way. And then there are other rabbit holes that people can go down. So ignoring diet composition in terms of macronutrients and ignoring food choice, people go down the rabbit holes of food distribution through the day. Oh gosh, I'm going to rip my hair out over whether to stop eating at 5 p.m., 3 p.m., or 6 p.m. Gosh, man, what if I eat something past 9 p.m.? Am I compromising my longevity? And things like that just make me laugh.
So what I hear you saying is body composition. So in other words, what's your body fat percentage, and how much fat do you have on you, and how much muscle do you have on you? And also
that matters. Body comp matters, physical activity matters, and your psychosocial state matters. So and recovery matters, sleep matters, everything matters. I wouldn't put the biggest possible spotlight on body composition. However, I would put a pretty big one on it.
I was talking to someone who could have been a potential client for my group coaching program. He was telling me, well, I start with a green smoothie in the morning, and I do this. He said, I was like, yeah, but you're obese. Nothing that you're saying matters because you're obese, because we know the biggest thing that leads to diabetes is fat mass, having excessive amounts of body fat. We know that it raises inflammation levels, right? Especially the visceral fat. And if you want to reverse diabetes, the thing to do that is to get people to lose fat. And we know how that's done. It's called a calorie deficit. And
it's
what would you say?
Too simple, though, bro. You're being a little too straightforward. We need to complicate things a little here. And of course, I'm being sarcastic, but there's other concepts to look at there. There is a contingent of folks who are really against the idea that you need to get out of obesity in order to increase your life expectancy or your health expectancy. But the evidence just is not in support of that. There is a concept called the metabolically healthy obese, but when we look at the state of obesity over longer periods of time, like 5-10 years, then the odds are stacked against that state, that physical state, not resulting in some sort of chronic disease. So we can look at snippets of good health in the metabolically healthy obese, and we can certainly look at cutoffs and say, look, let's put some proper definitions on obese and overweight and normal weight, and I will concede that classifications based on BMI are pretty much a load of crap until you start looking at the higher classes of obesity. So somebody can be borderline obese, but they certainly can be just one swole MF and
right.
be metabolically healthy. So, but the higher stages of obesity, there's very little argument and support that you can put in play for that to be something to be sustained and remain healthy. It's just the evidence just isn't there for that. So whatever diet it takes to get out of severe obesity is a good diet. Whether you do it with a bunch of protein and fat and a tiny bit of carbohydrate, or whether you do it with like a Pritikin style thing, or even just a full-blown vegan style thing. Well, that's a good diet for that. And then once you start optimizing body composition while maintaining adequate physical activity levels and psychological state, then it really kind of becomes a matter of splitting hairs and sometimes splitting atoms when we look at what might be the best diet to sustain longevity in a population that's already lean, already active, already getting enough sleep, and already in a good psychological state.
So I want to ask you something. So obesity is a big deal, like you said, and you didn't name them, but I will. The Health at Every Size movement, which some of the listeners are going to be familiar with, some of them aren't going to be. But it's basically, we're not going to open that one up today, I don't think. But I will say this. What I've found is that the majority of people that I speak to haven't had their body fat tested. And when they do, they're really surprised what their body fat percentage is. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the cutoff for obesity for men is 25% body fat, and for women it's 30%. Is that correct?
It's controversial because there's no official cutoffs for body fat percentage and obesity like there is with, the in quotes official cutoffs for BMI and overweight and obesity. So, but interestingly enough, there is some kind of relationship that's pretty close between body fat percent and BMI and what you can call obese and what you can call non-obese. It's just that there are some issues there between men and women, that some difference there that are not delineated when we're talking about body fat percent relating to BMI for obesity. So convoluted answer, a bit more simplified. There's really no, in quotes, official cutoff points for body fat percent that would determine obesity, that would be recognized by, major organizations and
not
such.
Yet,
it's
right?
It's all not yet. It's all relegated to BMI.
To BMI.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what would a person do? So you would you would do your BMI, in other words, and use that to figure out obesity. But can we get practical? Like, what would you say? Okay, so what you just said, so I can explain it, so we're clear, and everyone listening is clear. Is you said, okay, well, we haven't figured out. Okay, what is that point where you cross over to obesity? What body fat percentage is that? And it may even be different for different people, right?
I can throw some numbers down. I can throw some numbers down for that, Ted. And there's a couple of publications that I can cite, not from memory. I would have to dig back in one of my papers or presentations to get these references. I actually do remember the authors of one paper, but not the later one, and I can send them over to you.
Cool.
But it basically boils down to normal, healthy body fat percentages in the general population for men and women would be, for men, it's roughly 10 to 20% being normal, healthy. And then for women, you're looking at 20 to 30 being the normal, healthy range for body fat percent. And so we're just looking at population level stats. And so it's not fair to look at individuals and apply these cutoffs. So because, there may be some individuals who don't fit into those cutoffs, 10 to 20% for men, 20 to 30% for women, but they have a bunch of lifestyle factors that are appropriate, that healthy lifestyle factors, and they just happen to carry extra body fat. And there are those exceptions out there. I always like to bring up Daniel Cormier, who's been the heavyweight champ in the UFC, and obviously, he's got to work super hard to get his cardio to where it needs to be, and I think maybe obviously he loves to eat as well. But it's hard to make the argument that Daniel Cormier, as he's winning these UFC titles, is not healthy, in spite of probably crossing over into the at least the lower end of the obese spectrum.
Interesting. We're having to really use our brains here, Alan. And we're doing that in nutrition and health because it's just easier. Oh, so Alan, just tell me, do I do intermittent fasting? Do I cut carbs? Do I do keto? Can you just, I don't like your answer, Alan. Can you just tell me, so do I cut carbs or not? So you're making a really good point for the vast majority of people, losing body fat, for the vast majority of people who aren't conditioned to such a high level and showing up in an elite performance or elite sport and, winning,
Right.
if you're kind of getting your butt kicked in life and you do have excess fat, right? Maybe stressed at work, not feeling run down, not keeping up with your 5-year-old kid, not being able to keep up at work with the younger guys or younger girls, right? The younger women. Maybe it's time to look into what's going on health-wise. Would you agree with that?
Definitely would agree with that. And sometimes it starts off with just looking at your lifestyle, looking at what your habits and routines are that might be shortchanging you of the 1 to 2 hours more sleep that you need in order to properly function and be physically active during the day and suppress your ravenous appetite. So there sometimes you have to look a little bit beyond nutrition, go all the way straight to the source, go to sleep. Are you getting enough sleep?
But Alan, nobody argues about getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. That's not where all the good arguments. It's about being carnivore or keto carnivore or intermittent fasting keto carnivore and, vegan. And that's a really hard thing to hear.
It's about whether you cut off your last meal at 6 p.m. or 4 p.m. That's what it's kind of come down to in the most ridiculous forms. I was arguing with somebody online about, okay, so if you are super duper into early time restricted feeding, then let's get real practical here. What time in the night would you issue this universal directive for everybody to stop eating?
Right.
And then they're all, this person is just thinking that I'm setting them up for a smackdown. And of course I was, and they just refused to answer it. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So you have no practical number for that. And what's interesting is I've heard numbers thrown out, 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Oh, look at the studies. It's freaking 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock. Sometimes it's 2 o'clock.
Right.
Or if you go by the research and you adhere to the protocols there that actually saw some effects, some positive effects, then, and of course it's typically in the short-term research that it's just mainly hypothesis generating, not something confirmative of a fact or something that you can build practice guidelines on. Far from that, no. But yeah, you're looking at a cutoff point between like 2 p.m. And 5 p.m. if you want to go by the research. And when you look at the practices, just these social norms of dinner times across the planet, you're looking at 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., depending on what region of the planet that you're in for your final meal. And so are you really going to look at the early time restricted feeding research and see that, we can improve glycemic control if we eat earlier and cut our last mealtime off at 3 p.m.? Improve glycemic control. Oh, man, that stuff honestly drives me up the wall. And I understand how practitioners in this area, they're typically these young dudes who are in the first world with no kids, no wife. They're just freaking swinging single, hitting the clubs on the weekends and going,
time restricted feeding.
I'm going to time restricted feed early too. Woo. Because when I hit the club on Saturday night, man, and I have my 80 shots, I got to be ready for it. But so there's a certain amount of irony there. There's a certain amount of ignorance, a purposeful ignorance about the metabolic effects of a training bout. And even in the studies that look at early time restricted feeding, you're looking at sedentary conditions. So the exercise bout is the most metabolically profound event in your day by far. And the effects of that can last, they can last well into the following day. And so if you're looking at improving the parameters that we've most consistently seen from early time restricted feeding, it really does come down to glycemic control. There are many, many, many roads to Rome when it comes to improving glycemic control. You can just not even touch the positioning of your meal timing at all. You can still have your dinner. You can just literally change the food sources and or change the macronutrient, the macronutrient breakdown of your diet. And then you've improved glycemic control. You can not touch the diet at all. Add exercise. You improve glycemic control. You do not have to be a slave to the clock when you're trying to optimize health. The human organism is smarter than that. And yes, there is a circadian clock. And the circadian clock basically wants us to freaking go to sleep at night and wake up during the daylight. That's the main thing it wants us to do. As far as dinner cutoffs and stuff like that, you really start getting into man bun territory.
Man bun territory.
Yeah. You really start getting into man bunning over that stuff. There's neck bearding and there's man bunning. You go like you skip neck bearding, you go straight into man bunning when you talk about cutting off your effing dinner at 6 o'clock or else, right? So it's silly, but it makes people feel sophisticated. It makes them feel cutting edge. It makes them feel that they've found a special answer. And to that, I say, not really, bro.
Not really, broski. Yeah, well said. And it's definitely something where I think it's important to talk about the environment that we're in too, where people are like looking for, you know what? I'm trying to lose fat. It's really hard to lose fat. Yeah, it's not really, there must be something missing here. And I know you did something about hypothyroidism and its effect on metabolic rate. And I want to, if you share that with us, I would love to hear about it. But we try to find these complex reasons why we're not losing fat. And these complex solutions, like it must be that I'm eating too late. It must be that I'm eating too many carbs. It must be that I'm not in ketosis, right? And all these different reasons. And none of them, like you're saying, are true. And it takes someone like you who's not interested in no, I'm the time restricted feeding guy. Come buy my time restricted feeding course. And if you want coaching on time restricted feeding, I've got an upsell to my coaching program. Now I have all the same thing for fat loss, but I don't promote any of those things. I promote principles like calorie deficits and exercise and stuff. But if I were a time restricted feeding person, that's what I would do. Or if I were a ketogenic person, that's what I would do. And most people who promote that stuff, they're not saying, hey, listen, time restricted feeding they're not saying what you just said, which is one of many ways to improve your health. If you're interested in learning about time restricted feeding, I have this course for you and I can help you with it. They're saying, no, it is the thing. Like if you want to live longer, if you want to improve this is the thing. They're not saying, well, it's one way to do it. And they don't talk about the nuances in the studies, which I didn't even know because I haven't read them, that it was all done on sedentary folks. So if they're not exercising that much or at all, and you said, getting that metabolic boost from the workout is going to be much better than just cutting off your food intake.
The effects of the training bout, the insulin sensitizing effects of the training bout are profound. They are profound. They go way further into the day than most people assume. And it's just really interesting, Ted, because you've got people who are head over heels in love with early time restricted feeding as a result of these studies that are 24 hours long and seeing really interesting positive effects in the earlier window versus a later window. But then when you compare them to the backdrop of studies that are longitudinal and you just see a mix, you see a mess. You don't see this consistency of positive results with the earlier shifted eating. And then that's highly inconvenient for people who've already built their religion around early time restricted feeding and built some sort of a chrononutrition brand, if you will, where you're eating on the clock because, we as the human species are just, our bodies just can't figure shit out, right? A little bit silly, but then again, the pendulum swings the other way too, where there maybe 5 years ago there used to be this incredible enamorment with skipping breakfast. That was the thing. Like, oh, there's some magic if you just wake up and wait till about 2 or 3 o'clock before you eat. If you really want the magic real bad, you just one meal a day, dinner. That people started taking the concept, and it was the complete opposite direction, where the longer you could put off that first meal, the better off you are. Now it's like, okay, got to get breakfast, and breakfast is now apparently, yes, it is the most important meal of the day, and then you got to cut off your eating and starve your way through the late afternoon and evening. And you have these two different camps that crack me up. It's just really funny. I laugh at them. But sometimes you have to. Sometimes you got to call out the silliness where it stands. And you mentioned hypothyroid. This is kind of a gear shift into the hypothyroid topic. Hypothyroidism, sometimes there's subclinical levels of hypothyroid or mild hypothyroidism where they just don't have the sensitivity of the instruments to detect differences in resting metabolic rate between people with mild hypothyroidism, or in quotes, subclinical hypothyroidism, versus severe hypothyroidism. So severe hypothyroidism can affect resting metabolic rate. And I wrote about this in one of the issues of my research review. I believe it was, I'm not sure, I might have it open. Was it the September issue? September 2019 issue. Yeah. I did write about how much impact does hypothyroidism have on total daily calories burned. And so here's the problem, and this is might be a helpful thing for people with clients with hypothyroidism to know about. So roughly the average disadvantage that people with severe hypothyroidism that's not corrected with medication, they have about an 8% disadvantage in terms of resting metabolic rate. In terms of calories burned through resting metabolism, it's roughly a 7 to 8% disadvantage. So in more concrete terms, they are cheated out of 200-ish calories a day that a person without hypothyroidism would burn. And
it's like
that's
apples.
A significant. It's 2 apples. Yes, it is. For some people, it's a significant amount of calories. For some people, it's a small amount of calories. But it is a disadvantage. The place where this becomes an issue is when that's combined with a compromised energy out. So people with severe hypothyroidism, they tend to be more fatigued and tend to feel more lethargic than healthy, normal metabolism folks. Okay, so folks without hypothyroidism, they won't experience the same degree of lethargy and fatigue. So if you imagine, if we think liberally here and imagine, okay, somebody's burning 200 calories less through resting metabolic rate, and they're burning, another 200 calories less through just lying around more because they're fatigued, then you have a pretty significant disadvantage in this population. So the solution would be to just get a handle on both aspects of the energy balance equation. Get the hypothyroidism corrected with medication, and then objectively measure energy out in ways that you can. Now, if you rely on Apple Watch and Fitbit, you're in for a big disappointment. The research on the accuracy of measuring energy expenditure through those type of wearable devices is pretty dismal. You shouldn't rely on that. What's a little bit more objective would be something like a pedometer or step counter. And if you did insist on using the Apple Watch and the Fitbit, just realize it's not going to be accurate, but you can use it as a way to just benchmark change up or down.
Hey, Alan,
Okay.
just to be clear, you're talking about when the Apple Watch or the Fitbit tells you calories burned. But as far as the step counting of the Apple Watch or the Fitbit, that would be okay if you wear it all the time. It would at least, even if it's not accurate, it would at least give you a consistent number that you could either say, okay, well, I'm not, my steps have gone down.
Yeah.
Or
they've gotten the
up.
technology good enough to get the step count right. But as far as energy expenditure, they're not there yet.
And don't pay attention to the treadmills or the bikes either, right?
Yeah, measuring energy expenditure is it's a minefield, man. You would need a whole room calorimeter to really know what's going on with that, or doubly labeled water, which nobody can use in outside of a lab assignment and a research study. So you're going to have to depend on things like step count to get a handle on energy expenditure or relative or a marker of physical activity. So that would be the ticket there. And when you get a handle on that, plus the energy inside, then you can kind of get a handle on the entire program, because a lot of folks are just unaware that they have a whole lot less non-exercise activity than others when they're feeling fatigued and lethargic. So, yeah.
That is really profound. And if you're listening right now, if you're looking for the secrets, Alan is just giving them to you right now. And they may not be the secrets that you would wish for, right? Like if you're like, how do I make 6 figures a year with my business, or 7 figures? How do I take my 6-figure business to 7 figures? It's may not be like well, post more on Instagram, right? It's going to be like, no, get your sales funnel. It's these things that you're talking about that really matter so much. And I'd love to just dive into this idea, because I don't want it to go over anyone's head. That wraps up another episode of the Legendary Life Podcast. Now, that was part 1 of Alan Aragon. What we've started doing is breaking up the episodes, the longer episodes, into 2 parts. So if you enjoyed it so far, what I want you to do is go ahead and click on the next episode, which will be part 2 of Alan Aragon. And again, before you do that, if you are interested in transforming your body, I got to tell you, we are launching our one-on-one and group training program, the Legendary Life program for 2020 right now. It just opened. We already have 7 people. As I said, I record these all at the same time, so there may even be more people in there. If you want part of this transformation, this incredible group, or to hire me one-on-one, and you've been listening for a while and you're well versed about my approach and you know what I do works, I want you to go to legendarylifeprogram.com/apply to apply for your free breakthrough call. And if you're new to this podcast and you're curious what I'm talking about, or perhaps you've been listening recently but you're still on the fence, what I want you to do is watch our brand new masterclass, and you can find that at legendarylifepodcast.com/free. There's one for men, there's one for women. And again, this is brand new content. If you've watched our masterclass before, this is going to be different. So that's what I've got for you. And again, if you're ready to listen to part 2 of Alan Aragon, just click on to the next episode right after this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and speak soon.